Hello, I'm Dr. Pam Dixon, an ex officio board member for Arkansas ASCD. I hope you were able to watch last month's video as part of our Pocket PD series, A Power to Survive. This month, please join professional school counselors Rachel Davis and Mandy Hunt, along with the school nurse Sherry Plumley, as they discuss reaching every child in a global pandemic. We hope you find this series helpful in your schools.
Welcome back to the Power to Survive series. We're here to kind of discuss why it matters to that one. My name is Rachel Davis. I am a school counselor for Huntsville High School.
I'm Mandy Hunt. I'm the high school counselor at Prairie Grove.
And Martveld, Assistant Superintendent in Bee Ridge Schools.
Our first question is, what are students missing in a virtual environment versus a physical environment?
I think that a big thing that students are missing is that connection, that personal connection that they don't know they need yet. And so I had that experience myself as a educator, as a school counselor. I always felt like I was kind of a loner, I like to do things, on my own, and I don't like to ask for help and that kind of stuff. And I didn't realize how much I needed my colleagues and the people around me for support until we went home in March. And I really missed that connection. And I feel like our students at home, they're not getting that for the most part, and I don't think they even realize how much they need it. We have kids who can lock themselves away in their room and not speak to another human for hours at a time. They're not talking to the lunch lady or the school nurse and the teacher, those other people that make those connections in our buildings.
I think too, when you're thinking about that connection, that a lot of times as educators, counselors, leaders, and teachers, when we do get the opportunity to connect, we focus so much on that academic because we have such a sense of urgency about all the time that's been lost. So I think too that we don't take the time to develop those meaningful or casual contacts, to your point, that they might lose throughout the school day because we're so worried about them knowing their English, their math, and their history, and their science that sometimes we forget not only the connection at all, but the importance of a personal connection that isn't all about, their academic subjects. And what can we do? And those pieces are so critical. I hate to say it, even more so than their academics, really, at this point.
Yeah, I can see a virtual environment becoming very isolating because academics are being focused on even more through the teacher and the student in a virtual way, instead of taking the time or having the time even to connect with them personally. So then that also makes me want to wonder how are all of the changes that we've made to the physical environment, like face masks and having to stay 6 feet away from each other, is also affecting us in the classroom as well.
I think that goes right down to when you're talking about student behaviors and the increase that we may be seeing across K-12 buildings. Students who are having trouble making that importance of that connection with a teacher they've never seen their whole face. So, I think that our teachers are working very hard to get those personal connections and to overcome that barrier of that sense of a mask automatically puts a separation in between you and a student, no matter the grade. So I think teachers are being very targeted and specific into ways to go around that, while keeping themselves and students safe. But the importance of realizing that barrier, is there intentional or not? So I think that's been something that teachers and students are getting used to, but still not a perfect situation for sure.
I have found myself telling people I'm smiling at you, you can't tell, and I've tried to start waving more so they know that I see them and I'm not just walking by them. And I think one of the things that kids are struggling with, and you have to consider, we have kids on both ends of the spectrum. We have students who are stressed out when they see kids not wearing their mask correctly, when they're down below their mouth. We've had some really stressed out kids worried about the coronavirus, and we have kids that think the virus is a joke and don't want to wear their mask, and we have to tell them every time, please pull your mask up. And so they have to coexist together in the same classroom and in the hallways and things like that. And so that is a struggle, and it's stressful for the students. I think it's stressful for me to wear my mask all day. I don't enjoy it, and it is difficult. And so I can't imagine being 16 or 17 or 7 or 8 and having to do that.
Yeah, I think that's where body language becomes so much more important because, like you said, when you wave at them going down the hall, I've noticed I do it myself because I'm smiling under my mask, but nobody can see I'm smiling. So I make sure to make a point that I make a hand gesture or a motion towards the student when I see them in the hallway.
It makes me think about, whether it's advisory or homeroom and how we could be really intentional in teaching nonverbal communication. I wonder if taking that targeted time or a focus on, as you're talking about social, emotional, are we teaching students what nonverbal cues mean? Because they're so important, but they may be something we all take for granted intrinsically that for students K through 12, 17-year-old needs to learn some nonverbal cues too, especially if they're spending all their time communicating through a device or digital. So how important taking the time to stop and teach nonverbal things like eyebrows raised probably means they're smiling or gesturing, and how important those pieces could overcome some of those barriers or struggles too.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I think that's another opportunity that teachers can use to reach students in the classroom or even virtually, because all of the Zoom sessions involve that body language and those nonverbal cues. So I think that is something that would be nice to really focus on, or take the time out of your class period to kind of point out and talk to the kids about. So I definitely see how that would be beneficial.
I think you could even use a lot of mixed media if you wanted to, from a cartoon to commercials or any of those things to show that body language and have them really engage in activities. I think it'd be good practice for students to practice it, not just learn the concept or idea.
Yeah,
something to think
absolutely.
about.
Yeah, it reminds me of how I used to use Sean and the sheep in the classroom when I taught, and that's great for nonverbal cues.
Things like that, yeah, for sure.
Okay, so how can we help students kind of identify and describe and regulate their emotions in our current environment?
I think that's the $1 million question today, right? I think about, it goes back to students having a voice and then being empowered and have the skills, whether you're virtual or face-to-face with us, building that relationship so they are comfortable to say when they are struggling with the piece. And from littles who may not understand why they're feeling the way they feel with the isolation or separation. And I think it honestly goes to the parents and educating them on how to help ask the right questions of their students to see if they're slipping into that isolation and those feelings of loneliness, and especially if they're home with their, like your point, parents working all day, students are in their room trying to do their academics, but that intentionality of the contact and educating parents on the importance of that for the students, and then also the teachers on the importance of that, or anybody, any adult that's on our campus, from secretaries to SROs to counselors to anybody, maybe can be used to really be intentional about that thinking.
A lot of times a student, I've found, not in this, with everything going on, but even before all this, a lot of times kids just want to be heard. They just need to come in and sit down and let it out. And so we try to talk about different coping skills. And if you are, if it helps you to write about what's going on, then do that. If you like to color, then do that. If you like to turn your music up as loud as it can go and scream into your pillow, then do that. Find what works for you. And the big thing is, I think, just letting them know that it's okay. However they feel is okay. There's nothing wrong with those with emotions on opposite sides of what's going on. And so I think just being that person, just being someone, just being there for them to come and express themselves. Now, our virtual kids, that is the $1 million question, because like the examples I just gave are really for our in-person. It's hard to do that sometimes over a Google Hangout. The personal one-on-one, I think, is so important.
And I know that right now, just in education in general, teachers' times are spread really thin. But those scheduled Zoom times or Google Hangout times that they are scheduling with those students might be beneficial to just make one of those class periods just a check-in. How are you? How are you feeling? How are things going? To make the time for those personal connections. Even though it feels like a setback to take time out of your lessons when you get to see them so little, I feel like that point, or that piece, is so important.
I wonder too, if in the virtual setting, if being thinking about the importance of maybe bringing that family piece connection with a family and a student. You know, if you had a scheduled time to block in your day, if you're a counselor or maybe someone that doesn't have students back to back to back, if you could find even those extra people. I know with some of the precautions in place, some of the auxiliary teachers aren't able to do their full capacity. So are we utilizing all our human capital in a different way? They may not have gone to school to be a counselor, but maybe just that touch base from someone different for a change might get a big benefit to, well, the librarian's reached out to me. I wonder what she has this year.
Yeah.
Might be something to think about.
Well, I've even crashed some of my virtual teachers' Zooms when they were Zooming with their classes. So just taking that time as their school counselor to kind of just pop in and just talk to some of the students while they're having a virtual class. Or, just letting them know we're there.
We've talked too about getting those figures in our community that maybe our SROs and the people that those kids really gravitate to. We've even had our lunch ladies schedule some Zoom, was there frequent flyers that those kiddos you're not seeing this year that always had, and they're like, yeah, there's 3 or 4. So kind of helping them by giving them a little break in their normal day to actually reach out and say, the unexpected is kind of, we're seeing making a little bit of a light for those conversations that those kiddos are missing.
And right now, I think it's more important than ever that it's going to take a village.
For sure.
And so you're saying bring in that village, and I think that's great, really do, because everybody feels a little lost right now. Our lunch employees, our teachers, our students, and just taking that time is really important.
Our teachers at Prairie Grove are not teaching the virtual classes. We're using the Lincoln Learning option, and so we have a few teachers who we were able to free up a period a day, like one English teacher to check on all the English kids and math and those kind of things. And so we don't have those class Zoom sessions and things. So our connections, I think, have been a little more difficult. And we have quite a few of our online students who just aren't engaged at all. Now that was a conversation I think I told you that we had last week with our principals, like what do we do? How do we fix this? And so because they are, it's so easy to not check your email and miss all those things. So
I think that goes back to the importance of the adults being in a good place. I know in the last video series we were talking about the importance of the adults being in a happy and healthy place, that in order for our students to get that engagement, then the adults, and that as much as everybody, gets a little tense when you're saying professional learning, but I think that's a skill. We didn't go to college and get those skills to how to connect with a virtual family. So series like this can really make the difference in helping our teachers understand you can be super creative and give them freedoms to do things that maybe are unexpected.
Yeah, and it does go back to, self-care first so you can care for others, which is, it's important for sure.
I agree.
So I know we kind of touched on this a little bit, but how can we elaborate on showing that that they matter?
I think going back, if the student's a new virtual student, you have a different barrier. But if you had a student that maybe connected with last year's math teacher, or last year's English teacher, or last year's second grade teacher, or if they were kindergarten, who can we be super thoughtful about that they did have a connection with in the building? And maybe if that person is reading, I know that's off their caseload, but I think if you could narrow your top priority list of those that are, the urgency, like you're saying, the ones that are not connected, anybody in the building connect with the student on any level in any way, and getting that and person they aren't expecting, to make that. And I think it goes back to retraining our teachers and learning to be comfortable in that role of making those connections that are outside their comfort zone, really. So I think just finding that 1 or 2 people that may be in that student's life, even if it's a senior in high school, maybe their 3rd grade teacher meant a lot to them. So trying to really outspread, the options that you might be able to pull in to help those kids. Because I always know with seniors, when you get them down to elementary school, they always have that person. So even if you have, especially those seniors that you want to catch and not lose them and keep them on track to graduation, is there anybody, that favorite 3rd grade teacher that everybody loved, or something like that? Might be something to think about.
I think it does all come down to relationships, and that the old saying, kids they're not going to remember what you taught them; they're going to remember how you treated them. That's not really that's not word for word, but that's kind of the gist of it. And the relationships are the foundation in the classroom, virtually, and I think that is the difference with those kids being able to shut the door to their room and not talk to another human for 13 hours versus our kids who are at school that are still seeing those same teachers and seeing their friends and seeing the lunch ladies and stuff like that. And it's the relationships that are the foundation for everything, for their learning, for their motivation, and things like that. So I think it just starts with relationships.
Yeah, it does. And then that makes me also kind of think about the relationships that do lack in their home environment for a lot of these students. And so we could be that relationship for that one student that really just needs someone to know that they care. So I think that's kind of really important. And I know teachers, that's on the forefront of their mind. And I think it's also important for them to realize that we're not gonna get them all in one day. So don't spread yourself thin. Make sure that, if you've got one, in one day, if you reach one student, you're getting the one that matters.
Well, if it's that one hook, is it the one connection that you shared that makes a difference? And somebody, it's checking on those. And just like you're just pointing out, it could be one little simple thing. Like if you saw them at the store or something like that, or I heard you were at the store this weekend, even those things, especially we have a fortunate experience of being in a small community. So we might run into our students, even if they are virtual locally, at the football game or whatever, would be more easier for us than, the larger school districts. I think to your point, what is that one difference maker that could make, or the one call that you're like, well, we'll try again, and I think it's perseverance for the one.
Yes.
Don't give up on that piece or that one thing that can make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. So making connections beyond the classroom could be as simple as just sending your students an interest survey if you're not finding a way to connect with that kid, and just taking time to just do those small things.
I don't know, too. Have y'all, I was thinking aloud, or to myself, not loud, but I was thinking to myself about if you've got a virtual group, especially if they were older, but even the younger, could you simulate something like a recess? Could you simulate something like an advisory period where the students have that time to engage with each other, not necessarily a teacher-led discussion, but a facilitated discussion to give them, so if they knew every time they were wanting, they could engage. I was talking to a special education, our director actually, and she's doing some skill intervention with some students who are home this year. She's like, I start every meeting with a Kahoot based on their interests, whether it's about dinosaurs or cars or whatever they're hiking or whatever. We start with a Kahoot that has nothing to do with what we want to talk about really that day, but they know if they're not on time, they miss that. So something as simple as that about their interests, wonder if students sign up for interest things or discussion boards that maybe might think about that.
And even just sharing those tactics that they use with other teachers. Just kind of sharing the love so that others have resources that they can use to kind of, help stretch their time and allow them to take out time for personal connections, because they're not always having to reinvent the wheel.
I think flexibility and structure too, for sure. Allowing those kiddos to have some flexible time. Maybe they know that that's in there, but they can feel like they can connect and do something different.
Well, thank you for joining us for the Power to Survive series. It matters to that one.